Hi, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the Crypto Standard podcast with me, Jim.
And me, Jordan. Oh, I
Jordan,
said Jordan there. I
I
usually go by
know,
Jay.
you'll never guess what I did yesterday.
What did you do?
96 nautical miles solo cross-country navigation.
Wow.
I
I I
did
don't know
it.
what that means, really.
Basically, I just flew on my own all around Scotland, landed at two different airports. It was brilliant.
You're getting close. When's the sign-off date?
So I've got my radio exam on Thursday, and then after that, I've got a couple of hours of general handling circuits, and then hopefully sit my exam for the next couple of weeks, weather dependent.
Awesome.
I know. I just need Bitcoin to go up and up and up so I can buy myself a little plane. Okay, enough about me. Let's get on to someone who's really special, who's taking the whole I'm going to say Bitcoin as well as crypto world just by the scruff of the neck. She's also superb, and I love the human side that I saw in this lady and what she did for Peter McCormack when Peter McCormack had a really, really bad back issue. I think she actually flew somewhere to nurse him. I thought it was brilliant. Natalie, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
Tell us, we've listened to so many podcasts, so we feel like we know you. Give us 1 minute on your background. Give us your elevator 1 minute pitch and let's go.
Sure. So I host a podcast called Coin Stories, which focuses not only on Bitcoin headlines and education about what Bitcoin is, but also on the origin stories, the backstories of the biggest names in the space. I've always loved, hearing how people got to be where they are, why they believe in what they believe in. And so I wanted to kind of provide that for the Bitcoin space. And before that, I was a broadcast journalist for more than 10 years, reporting on breaking news and investigative stories for television outlets in the US. And so, I'm kind of taking my skills as a reporter and storyteller and shifting them to focus on Bitcoin, which has been wonderful.
Wow, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I listened to you on Peter McCormack podcast, and honestly, I love your story, and I want our listeners to also know your story. So first off, let's kick it off. We ask all our guests, how did you get into Bitcoin? Everyone's got a different story of how they got into it. Did you have that aha moment? Like, this is it.
Yes. And like many people, I think it took me a while to have my aha moment, after I first heard about Bitcoin. And I wish I could, rewind time and tap myself on the shoulder and tell myself to, read things like the Bitcoin standard sooner when I first heard the word Bitcoin. But basically my story is, I believe that, that Bitcoin is sort of the renaissance of the American dream, which is really the story of my life. My family is from Poland, and we immigrated to the US when I was a little girl. And I just watched my parents work really, really hard. They fled a country where they grew up in communism, where everything, the power was centralized. There was no sense of upward mobility. And, they would tell me stories of having to wait in line for basic necessities. And life was just very hard. There was no sense of hope for the future. And so my mom always dreamt about coming to the US. And when they did so with a feeling of self-determination and, just wanting to make life better for their family and wanting to provide their kids with a great education. And what I witnessed over my young life is two people, my parents, who worked super, super hard to give their family, a good life, and really only dreaming of just like the middle class life, like a house, maybe a vacation every year, like a car in the garage. And every year things just got harder and harder. Everything got more expensive. It didn't matter if there was someone that was Republican or Democrat in the White House. Life for the average person got harder. It became hard to even conceptualize the idea of retiring and affording, college for me. And so, I watched that and I always just wondered, why is it so hard? Like, why is it so hard? If you're a good person and you work hard, my parents were working 6 days a week, morning to night. My dad was getting up, like scraping the car at 3:00 in the morning to head to work, and life just was difficult. And then my parents finally saved enough to put a down payment on our first house. We had been living in a tiny apartment where my parents didn't even have their own bedroom. And they finally saved up enough for a down payment, took a loan, which, you know, our country just encourages everyone to go into debt. And then the housing market bubble popped and they lost the house within a couple years of having it. So it was like they achieved the American dream in a sense, and then they lost it again. And I think like a frustration built inside of me, and I wanted to do something where I held the powerful accountable, because I felt like the system was unfair and it was somehow rigged. And if you weren't born to the right family or you weren't in politics, you basically you got screwed in the end. And so I became a reporter. I always found it fascinating to be able to go into the world of journalism and sit down with, you know, political leaders and powerful people and learn from them, and also tell their stories and cover important events that were happening. And I grew to feel like there's something really broken in the system that was leading all of us to become so polarized and pick a team, and you're either on this team or that team, and everyone blames someone else for the problems. And then I discovered Bitcoin, and it wasn't until 2017, and I really had to do the work. I had to do a lot of education. And I realized that the thing that I knew was broken, but I didn't understand, was our money. Our money was broken, and the fix through technology and brilliant programming and the best of intentions was Bitcoin. And so I became very passionate about it, and I wanted to spread the message, and I pivoted my career, and that's sort of my story.
So do you think, and that's an amazing story, and it's very typical of a lot of people who've got entrepreneurial drive. You strike me as having that kind of entrepreneurial drive as well. Do you think, Natalie, that the American dream, and it was always a thing that anyone could be president? Not really. Anyone could aspire and move and make money and buy their house and all that sort of stuff. Is it over? Is the American dream, as we potentially come to this fourth turning type scenario, or do you really believe that Bitcoin could be the savior of the American dream?
Yeah, I really do believe that Bitcoin can spark the renaissance for the American dream. That's one of the reasons why I want to spread awareness about it and educate people so that they protect the money that they work so hard for. You shouldn't have to, you know, work twice as hard to earn money by risking it in the stock market or trying to figure out real estate and basically having two jobs in one. And what makes me really sad is that I'm a millennial, and I look at my peers, and, you know, everyone has a good degree and everyone went to college and they checked off all the boxes they need to check. And yet everyone feels stressed out about finances. They feel like they can't have children because they can't plan for their financial future. They can't afford a house. Their parents were able to buy a house for, you know, $100,000. Now that house is worth 1.2 million. And it's like, how do you afford that with jobs paying what they pay today? And so, yeah, I do feel like in so many ways the American dream has died, or it's changed. It's afforded to the few at the expense of the many, and that's frustrating to me, because again, I kind of go back to the fact that I think that, you know, the playing field should not be so broken at the very beginning. You know, life is a lottery, right? We're all born to different families, different income levels. We all have different skills, different desires, different motivations. But you know what? If you work hard and you're passionate and you're driven, you should be able to afford, you know, a basic American life. What was once, you know, the middle class was that ruled all the classes. It was the biggest one. We had a bunch of American middle class families who could afford lives for their children. And today it's like it's shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, and we have more people falling into poverty, and we have the billionaires getting richer and richer. So I don't like that system. I think it breeds a sense of discontent and anxiety and frustration from people being left behind. And I want to help, you know, equalize the playing field. And I think Bitcoin will do that.
Well, it's not any better over here in the UK, can I say? The haves have got even more, and the have-nots are really struggling. And so let me take you back a couple of years. Jordan and I were listening to Peter McCormack's podcasts, What Bitcoin Did, when Peter was building an audience. We were listening to people like Michael Saylor, when he had Max Kaiser, all the people you know. And I used to watching Max Kaiser 2 years ago thinking, who is this crazy guy? And then look at him now. So did you, apart from reading books, did you immerse yourself in watching the YouTube videos and the podcasts and listening and sort of framing what these people were saying about Bitcoin?
Yes. So when I sort of went down the proverbial rabbit hole, if you will, I had a full-time job. I was a reporter. And although I tried to pitch stories about Bitcoin that allowed me to sort of embrace my passion on my job, it was very difficult because you can probably imagine it's just really misunderstood and the mainstream media kind of grabs onto the negative headlines. And so I had to just take my own time. So I would wake up at like 5 o'clock in the morning. I would read, listen to podcasts, listen to Pump and Peter McCormick and Michael Saylor videos. I would be on YouTube and just reading articles, educating myself until about 9 o'clock when I would have to go to work. And then after work or in between work, I would once again be consuming more and more information to educate myself. And, for me, it was really interesting because I'm a person of faith. And I believe that things happen for a reason. I think that there's something divine and beautiful in the invention of Bitcoin. And I think that I was led to it for a certain purpose, because I also saw a need in the space where we have all these brilliant people who are engineers and computer scientists and all that. Well, what do I bring to the table? I've been in front of a camera for the last 10 years. I've been taking messages and simplifying them and shortening them and condensing them to something that's a soundbite or 2 minutes. And I wanted to kind of bring that skill to this industry and help people understand and help get normal, just average, millennials into this area, and my parents and people that just are skeptical and they don't get it and they need a little help going down the rabbit hole. So yeah, I've put in a lot of work, and now I still put in a lot of work because it's just nonstop, right? The podcasts don't stop coming, the videos don't stop coming, even though I'm creating some of them now. But it's been an amazing process, and I feel very fulfilled helping people understand Bitcoin and invest in it.
So very quickly before Jordan comes in, so it's interesting. It's interesting for me. So I'm a boomer. Jordan's a Gen Z, and you're a millennial. So I'm watching you young people, and what you've both done and are continuing to do is you're doing your master's degree. You're not going to a college or university. You're not paying Yale or Harvard millions of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars. You're up at 5 o'clock in the morning, because I know he is as well, and you're reading and you're researching and you're forming opinion, and you are basically becoming your own professor of money, aren't you?
Yeah. And I think that's amazing what digital information has enabled for us, because we can, you don't have to necessarily go to an institution anymore and learn from a professor and perhaps even be driven down a certain way of thinking. You can be open to all sorts of different viewpoints and literature and takes and articles. And so I think it's really amazing that we have this ability. And if you have the desire, if you have the passion and you have the drive, then you can learn anything really online. Right. So I think that this will also transform education. I really do, because what's the need for, paying $50,000, $60,000 a year for going to, some building where all the information is really in front of you if you want to learn it yourself, unless it's a specific, trade or skill. So yeah, I think the information's out there, but it's also a very confusing, wide gaping landscape, and some people need help down it.
100%. There's so much noise out there at the moment, as we're seeing today with the whole environmental narrative taking over again in Bitcoin. But I want to steer away from that. And a lot of our listeners we've been getting questions in, because obviously I'm Gen Z, he's a boomer. So we get both demographics coming. And a lot of the younger generation are actually asking us questions of, how do they persuade their parents? Because there's so much money locked up essentially with their parents. How do they persuade them to look into and learn about this new technology, this new way of thinking financially? How did you persuade your family and maybe even your friends as well?
Yeah, it's definitely challenging for older generations. I will say that, my parents, like I mentioned earlier, they came from a background where they saw communism and they knew they never wanted to live under an oppressive government. So the idea of something that can't be, confiscated, can't be debased, that has, value that can't be essentially manipulated is important to them, but they love something physical. I mean, these are folks that used to, have gold actually stashed at home. My mom was always a gold bug. She believed in hard money and she believes in freedom and all these principles that Bitcoin stands for. But she much more, felt like, you want to be able to touch it and hold it. And so that's been, I think, the biggest hurdle. But honestly, for my family, I sent them, so they still speak Polish to each other and they read Polish literature and Polish news. And so I sent my mom the Bitcoin Standard translated into Polish. And that was like her aha moment, because she agreed with everything that it said. And I think she still, she doesn't still fully understand the programming and the coding, because it's so hard to understand how Bitcoin was created and SHA-256 and encryption. These are very complicated topics, especially for a generation that is used to paper money and physical things. But at the same time, I think that she sees the power and potential of technology and how transformative it has been in our lives, including the internet, right? Like, how many of us know all the protocols that allowed for email and for the internet to change our different industries, and yet we use it every day and we sort of take it for granted at this point. And so I think that Bitcoin will experience sort of the same adoption curve in terms of people not understanding it, being very skeptical, and then running on board trying to get it, because it is really this life raft and you don't have to know how to mine it or program it in order to appreciate it and get so much value out of it. In the same way that, I don't know how to build a car engine, but I drive a car and I very much appreciate the technology behind that. So yeah.
If it's what Jordan did it over a year ago, he did a little presentation on PowerPoint, maybe 5 or 6 slides about how to create generational wealth. And then he did that presentation to his mum and dad, and as a result of that, they bought some Bitcoin.
Oh, awesome.
Have you seen the movie Step Brothers?
Yes, a long time ago. Yes.
It's very similar to a presentation that they done as well. I just sat them down and was like, you have to listen to this.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
So, Natalie, in the UK, and I know that you're friendly with Peter McCormack. In the UK, we're in a crypto or Bitcoin vacuum right now. Apart from Peter, there's no one really else has got an audience. There's no politicians, there's no councillors, no one standing up and saying, let's create a debate as to have Bitcoin as a currency or a reserve. There's just nothing going on. I think I'm going to have to chain myself to the gates of Downing Street with a big Bitcoin on my forehead before someone will take us seriously. However, there's a lot going on in America. I mean, as you just talked about, what's in terms of proof of work, proof of stake, Senator Lumen just came out today and said this Ripple co-founder stuff about re-engineering the code and Bitcoin's a load of nonsense. But there's a lot of political people, politicians, senators, congressmen, mayors getting on board with understanding Bitcoin over there, isn't there?
Yes, it's funny. I have an interesting relationship with politicians because of my reporting background. I have to, just for a little bit of background, I would report on elections and campaigns and different political leaders. And I just became very jaded. It didn't matter what party they were. I just sort of distrusted them. I came to distrust them. I felt like every single year they make these grand promises, they blame someone. And then every year I would report on the same problems getting worse, even though a bunch of money was spent. And none of them ever lost their jobs. There was never any consequences for being a poor politician or not meeting your campaign promises. So I have a very skeptical view of pretty much anyone in elected office and what their intentions are. That's not to say there aren't great people or people who go in with like the best of intentions, but I truly think our system and how it relates to campaigning with money and, donations and PACs, it's just very, very, very broken and leads to corruption. So I want to say that first. What I'm encouraged by is people like Senator Lummis and Warren Davidson and other elected officials who have really started to put in the work. They've really sat down, wanted to understand and educate themselves on the technology before they make policy statements. What I don't like is when I see people like Senator Warren, who this entire community is trying to educate her and help her and like wants to sit down with her in her office and just say, hey, let me share how this helps your constituents and why, someone who's progressive should be passionate about Bitcoin and the opportunities it affords people. And she just is shut out. Like she just closes the door and says, no, I've made up my mind and this is the way it is. And that's so frustrating, because what we need is we need younger political leaders in this country. We have too many, septuagenarians. We need people that are younger, that embrace technology, that take the time to learn it, and that want to really drive change and spark change and take some risks. Unfortunately, where we've been headed in this country, and it affects the world because we're the global reserve currency, is we've just gone into a debt spiral. And again, there are no consequences for these political leaders who make promises, hand out a bunch of money, go further into debt, leave the tab for future generations, and boom, they retire on fat, pensions. It's not okay. I don't like it. So for me, I get very passionate because I want to see more Bitcoiners in office. And I think that'll happen slowly but surely. I think we have to be helpful and constructive and help bring them down the path. But there will also be ones that just, they don't get it. They don't want to get it. And we should get those people out of office.
Jordan said to me at the last couple of months, is that why are there so many old grey men at 80 years of age in charge of countries?
Yeah.
So let's move it on a bit to somebody who's not grey haired and in charge of a country, and that's President Bukele. What do you think about him? Who is he? I mean, I'm looking at him thinking, wow, this could be some experiment. Tell us about him.
So I have a really great impression of President Bukele. I had the honor of meeting him in person recently when I went down to El Salvador. So I've made 2 trips down there recently just to see how Bitcoin adoption is going in places like Bitcoin Beach and seeing how it's being immersed in the economy, and then also to visit with the president. And, there's so much criticism out there. People call him a dictator. Obviously the IMF and these central planners around the world, they criticize his move. The US sees it as a risk to the stability of our financial system. But what I see is a person who is a young risk taker who really wants to see the country that he grew up in move in a better direction, a more fair direction, a more equal direction, where people have access to capital and have the sense of an El Salvador dream. So many people in that country did what my parents did. They wanted to leave because things weren't good and things were, gang ridden and violent, and they wanted to flee to the economic opportunity of the United States. And then they would send back money to their family members. And what we're seeing now, just even in less than a year of Bitcoin being legal tender, and sort of the opportunities and investment that is being attracted to the country, we're seeing people that are from El Salvador who want to come back home and want to build and want to, sort of grow within their own communities there. And so I'm really hopeful, because at the end of the day, he's purchasing something that, yes, is a risk, but he's thinking about the future. He's thinking about the long-term payoff that something like this will have. And it's a currency, it's an asset he will never be able to control the supply of, expand, manipulate, control. So, a dictator doesn't normally do that, right? A dictator would want total control over the money of the country. And so I find it to be very inspiring. I think that he is going to go down in history as an amazing leader. And I look forward to hopefully sitting down with him again soon.
What you said there, it's becoming the El Salvador dream. And I honestly agree with that, because I'm sitting in Mexico right now, and this is where I've relocated because I don't want to be in the UK at the moment, because of like how they are looking at crypto. So I've followed the energy of crypto, and it seems to be over here, Central and South America. And do you think, like, going forward, this is going to become more common? I'm chasing where the energy of crypto is, and hopefully going down to El Salvador in the next few weeks. Do you think this is going to become more common for our age?
Yes, absolutely. I think, the smaller countries will adopt it first. I think that places like Honduras and other Latin American countries will be the next dominoes. Yeah. And I really do think that because they're in early, we're going to see such an improvement to the average life of the people there. And I hope that it does in turn sort of impact how many people are trying to flee and come to the US border, which has caused a crisis here that is very politicized, right? So yeah, I do have a hope. And it's amazing, Bitcoin community calls this game theory, right? And like, it's sort of gradually, then suddenly. I would have never imagined that in the last year, when I've devoted my career to this, that nation states would be adopting Bitcoin, that a country like Russia would suddenly be putting a bullet in the head of the US dollar as global reserve currency and saying we might accept Bitcoin for payments for commodities. I mean, I just feel like we are living in historic times. And because I understand Bitcoin and because I feel that the network is truly resilient and there is no real threat to it, I do believe that this is the future. And so I hope that America gets on board soon. I hope America purchases some for our balance sheet because we so desperately need it.
Yeah. So let me say some names to you. Dan Held, Jeff Booth, Lawrence Lepard, Greg Foss, Max Kaiser, the Pomp brothers, Raoul Pal, Michael Saylor. See, when I say, so there's a lot of male names there. When I say those names to you, what fascinates me as I've watched this over the last 2 years, and we've gone down the macroeconomics rabbit hole, is the brain power that is in Bitcoin.
I think that Bitcoin has the smartest people on the planet, if I'm being honest. That's probably why I was so attracted to the space and wanted to interview them as well, because, to sit down and talk to these people, you're in the presence of greatness. You're absorbing their knowledge and learning from them firsthand. And one thing that I will say about myself, probably something that attracted me to journalism, is I love to learn. There's so much to learn in this beautiful world. And I think that learning Bitcoin has made me feel so inspired and hopeful about the future. And the stories have been told through some of the greatest minds that I think exist. And so it was funny because I had a mentor who actually encouraged me to do the podcast. And he said, he knew how much I believed in Bitcoin and saw it as being the solution to so many problems that I was reporting on. And he literally said to me, he goes, "What, don't you want to meet all the people that are changing the world? Don't you want to talk to them? And don't you want them to know you?" And I said, "Yeah, I do. I actually do want to talk to them." So I started to reach out, and it kind of blew my wildest dreams how much the podcast has grown. But I wanted to learn from the smartest people in the world, and I think the smartest people in the world are Bitcoiners.
Yeah. I have to agree with you. I mean, when I listen to Saylor, sometimes I just go, wow.
Yeah.
MIT rocket scientist. So coming, rolling back a little bit to El Salvador and President Bukele, does he come into that? When you're dialoguing with him, do you get this sense that he's also not just a visionary, but got a big brain on him?
Oh, absolutely. And, it's only recently that El Salvador has been purchasing Bitcoin, but Bukele has been in it for years. He saw this years ago, and it's really amazing how passionate he is about serving and having the legacy of making the country better, because they have been, torn through civil war and, impoverished communities, and he wants to make a difference. And I think that that's really important to him. He has a really strong relationship with his father, who was really revered by the community there. And, I talked to him a little bit about his background, and, he went from owning bars in San Salvador, owning nightclubs, to giving all of those up, selling all of them to run for mayor. He became mayor. And back in 2017, he was talking about buying Bitcoin as mayor. And so he's gotten it for a while. He's put in the work. He's read all the books. Talking to him is fascinating. He's really smart. And I think that El Salvador is really lucky. I know that there are a lot of negative, controversial headlines, and you can't predict the future, but I really do think that El Salvador is lucky to have him as a leader.
And
What? I'll go.
By the way, John,
what do you think? So at the moment, because I'm so passionate about where I'm from. We're from Scotland, and I've written an open letter to the Scottish government, and it got published in the Bitcoin magazine, which I was super happy with. But I don't know if this is the right approach, because it's fallen on deaf ears. They don't want to listen, because there's no one in Parliament that really cares. They love the system how it is. And do you think this is the best approach, though, going after the parliaments, or do we just wait until the game theory plays out and then maybe the younger generation come in? But that's going to take a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's an easy answer, because with Bitcoin, I think different features and different aspects of Bitcoin appeal to different people, right? So for me, it was this idea that that I would be able to take care of my family. I want my money to go up in value. I want something. I want us to have something other than this inflationary policy that's created booms and busts and disproportionate access to capital to the wealthy as opposed to everybody else. And so the idea of shrinking the wealth concentration was important to me. I think, everyone comes to Bitcoin from a different perspective, a different background. And I think we should orange pill everyone we can, from our friends to our grocery store owners to, our teachers to the politicians. I think everyone just slowly but surely will get on board. And I think it's happening. Sometimes I was interviewing Jack Mallers, and he said something interesting to me. He said, we're in Bitcoin, we're so immersed in this like echo chamber that we're constantly hitting refresh, waiting for like the Google announcement or Apple announcement. And it's like, we have to zoom out a little bit, because look how much has happened in just the last year, right? I mean, look how much has happened just since the pandemic. I almost feel like, in a weird way, the pandemic was a gift to Bitcoin in showing all of these use cases and the value proposition, because what did the government do in response? They just printed a historic amount of money and had no qualms about what that would do in the future and how that would affect people and how that would make the rich richer and the poor poorer. And Bitcoin highlights all of these things. It gives you a reason to look into the current system. So, I think it'll happen, like Bitcoiners say, gradually, then suddenly. And honestly, it's not a bad thing that the price isn't 100 yet, because I want to accumulate more personally. And if it's 100, I'm not accumulating as much. So.
So you're right. The pandemic, I remember March 2020, and that's just when I really started studying hard. It not only showed up and highlighted how the frailty of our politicians and how they went about it, but it also gave people time, because they weren't at work and they were furloughed, to study and watch videos and learn more about it. I've got a couple of questions that I struggle with this one because I don't fully understand it. And we may together not have the answer to it. So when I look at Michael Saylor, so Michael's come out again today saying that he's borrowed $205 million from Silvergate, and they're going to buy roughly 4,000 Bitcoin at today's prices. So he's accumulating a huge pile of Bitcoin. And you want to buy Bitcoin to create generational wealth for you and your family, and so do we. Some people would say, well, hold on a minute, there's a billionaire buying Bitcoin to make himself rich. But we know that's not what he's doing. But I mean, there's always going to be that side to it as well. What is Michael going to do with all that Bitcoin in the company?
I'm not sure of his long-term plans other than holding, but look, if we move into the Bitcoin standard and Bitcoin is a unit of account, then even Michael Saylor will have to spend some Bitcoin, right? I mean, he's going to have to pay the people who work for him. And I think more and more people will be asking or demanding to be paid in Bitcoin, because it is the one form of money that exists right now that can't be manipulated, that can't be seized or controlled, and that is in the long run going up in value, as opposed to everything else that seems to be collapsing around us, right? So I think that the world under the Bitcoin standard will ultimately be more egalitarian, in the sense that it will be based on what an economy should be based on: real price signals with real interest rates and supply and demand, and what you bring to the table, what goods and services that are not, kind of tainted by currencies that are manipulated and debased, and currency wars and exchange rates and this and that. I mean, it would be so great to see what we could create as human beings in a world that has one global neutral currency. I think that would be amazing, and one that again goes up in value and allows you to save for the future, so that the money that you don't put in the bank just melts away like an ice cube, and you have to stress out after your 9-to-5 job how you're just going to keep your savings. I just think it would be amazing to reorder the world and have a chance to kind of rebuild it and have it be one that young people can look to the future with hope and look to the future of how they can contribute through technology and through the individual skills and passions that they have. And right now, I just feel like, I don't know, I feel like everyone has this sense of just fear about the future, frustration, or feeling like it's rigged, it's not fair, and it's lined up against them. And so I hope Bitcoin offers that. And that doesn't mean that everyone's going to be equal. There's still going to be wealth inequality. I don't think it's going to be as drastic because I don't think that the incentive system the incentive structure isn't corrupted. So I don't think it's going to be this like ridiculous wealthy and everyone else, homeless on the street. I don't think it's going to be that big of a gap, but there's still going to be inequality. Some people are motivated and some people want to sit on the beach, it's going to depend on the person. But I do think that Bitcoin can bring about a more egalitarian society, which I think would be better for everybody.
So 2 or 3 years ago, the narrative was in crypto, it was Lambo this, Lambo that. It was now, one of the interesting things that I perceive in Bitcoiners ostensibly is that they don't talk about Lambos. And I think coming back to people like Michael Saylor, if he does become a Bitcoin multi-billionaire as a result of the price going up, his philanthropic work will be stunning.
Yes.
And I see the Bitcoiners as more, what's the word? More, this is probably the wrong description. They're going to be more like monks as opposed to Lambo joyriders when it happens.
Yeah, no, I really admire Michael Saylor, and I'm glad you pointed that out because he is at his core a philanthropist, and he has put forth so many efforts and so much money to making sure that education is accessible and free. And so he wants to make not only Bitcoin education free, but he wants to make college free and provide access to that for people who, have the ability and have the drive to want to learn. And I think that education is so important, right? It's what drives society forward and allows us to progress and create new technologies and harness, the potential of the capital and resources that we have. So education is fundamentally so passionate about it. And it would be great to be in a place where now through the internet, you can really get an education anywhere. And if it's free, that's amazing. And I applaud him for that. And if Bitcoin allows him to stretch that, to every area and inch of the globe, then that's great for all of us.
Yeah. So I'm just going to ask one final one. I think Jordan wants to ask you all about Miami, but do you think in the next 18 months, we're going to have another country or two doing what President Bukele is doing?
Yes. I think that there's going to be at least one. I think it's going to be Honduras next. I don't think it's going to be something as big as Mexico yet. Although I do think that down the road, every single country will be a Bitcoin country unless it has an authoritarian regime like China, which wants to just expel anything that they don't control, which is sad. And I think it's going to prove disadvantageous to them. So yeah, I think it's going to be the small Central American countries first. And then I think it's going to be the bigger and bigger ones.
Wow.
Awesome. And then obviously we've got the Bitcoin conference coming up. Is it next week? It's come fast. Mm-hmm. Are you excited about it? Because it's getting described as the biggest maths conference essentially in the world, because it's the smartest people that understand what is going on. I'm very jealous that you're going and I'm not. Are you excited for it?
Why aren't you coming?
The prices
you can't afford the Airbnb prices.
The prices.
Yeah, I know. Miami Beach is expensive that week. Look, so the Bitcoin conference is actually a very special event for me because when I became really passionate about this, I wanted to start the podcast, and I decided to launch my show last year, which was actually held in June. So it was less than a year ago. It was about 10 months ago, right? And I decided that I would attend. I got a press pass. I requested a media pass, and I wanted to launch my show and tell people that they can now listen to these great people that they're going to watch on stage, but listen, what's their backstories? Where are they from? How are their, childhoods, upbringings? How did they find Bitcoin, and why did they feel convicted in the technology? And so I went, and I also got a chance to meet people that I really wanted on the show. So I requested Michael Saylor in person. I went backstage and I walked right up to him with this little business card I made, and I asked him to be on my show. And I, paid like hundreds of dollars for Safadine's carnivore dinner so that I could ask him in person and beg him because he wasn't responding to me. And it was just such an amazing event, and one in which I felt so intimidated and overwhelmed by everyone around me because I didn't know anybody and there aren't a lot of women in the space. And to think that in less than a year, I've somehow, I'm somehow speaking, I'm on the stage emceeing. I went from 2,000 followers to almost 200,000. It's just like, it's incredible. And it just shows that this space is just so welcoming and so amazing, and also so hungry for information and people who care. And so I'm just so grateful. So the Bitcoin conference is a very special full circle moment for me.
I'm just glad we'll see you on the stage instead of Max Kaiser's legs. He's always showing his legs off.
I think his legs will be on stage too.
That's our time. I mean, our time's flying up, and we know how busy your time is. Just give us another 30 seconds on your show and where people can catch it.
Yeah, so it's the Coin Stories podcast. It's on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Google Play, all the podcasting platforms. And I interview really the legends in the space, the biggest Bitcoiners and macroeconomic voices about Bitcoin headlines and the things that are, evolving in the space. But also I go back in time. I start at the very beginning. I'm like, who are you? Where are you from? What did you want to be when you grew up? What were your first jobs? How did you find Bitcoin? So it's really this beautiful journey of Bitcoin and these unique kind of human interest stories from the biggest people in the space. So super grateful how much it's grown, really grateful that people like Peter now want me on his show, because all I want to do is just help bring people on and humanize the space and make it approachable and understandable. And so that's what I've been doing. And you can also find me on Twitter at Nat Brunell.
At Nat Brunell. There you go.
Yeah.
So Jordan, I mean, wow.
Yeah, I honestly would recommend anyone to listen to Coin Stories and to follow Natalie, because you are a leading figure in Bitcoin now. And honestly, the value of the information that you're spreading is priceless. Like, it is honestly amazing. So thank you so much for coming on our podcast as well.
Well, thank you for having me. I don't deserve those words, but thank you. I appreciate it.
And always, Natalie, keep independent. Use that journalistic brain you've got and just keep pushing and nudging and finding out more, because it means so much to us. Thanks very much. I can't wait to see you on stage at the Miami Bitcoin conference.
Thank you. I really appreciate being on your show. Thank you.